Picture a small boy, barely 3 years old, sitting on a veranda under a dark sky. His father sits next to him, silent, barely saying a word. The next morning, that father drives them to the airport and disappears from his life. No phone calls, no letters, nothing. For 10 whole years, that little boy wouldn't hear from his dad again. This wasn't the plot of a sad movie. This was the real childhood of one of Hollywood's most beloved stars, a man who would grow up to make millions cry with his performances, but who started life with tears of his own. The boy's name was Keanu Reeves. Born in Beirut, Lebanon in 1964, Keanu came into a world that seemed determined to keep him moving. His mother was British, a costume designer with dreams of her own. His father had Chinese and Hawaiian roots, but he wasn't built for family life. When he walked away, he left behind a single mother trying to figure out how to raise 2 kids on her own. What do you do when your world falls apart before you even understand what a family is supposed to look like? For Keanu's mom, the answer was simple. You keep moving. You survive. You don't let your kids see you break. So they moved. A lot. From Lebanon to Australia. From Australia to New York. Then finally to Canada. Each move meant new faces, new streets, new schools. Imagine being a kid who never got to keep friends for long. Every time you started to feel comfortable, it was time to pack up and start over again. But here's the thing about Keanu's mother. She didn't give up. She remarried, trying to build a stable home for her children. It didn't always work out. She married again and again. Each time, Keanu had to adjust to a new father figure, a new family dynamic, a new version of normal. Most kids would have become bitter, angry at the world, but something different was happening inside young Keanu. He was learning to adapt, to survive, to find himself even when everything around him kept changing. School became another battlefield. Not because Keanu was a troublemaker, but because his brain worked differently. He had dyslexia, a condition that made reading incredibly difficult. While other kids breezed through their homework, Keanu struggled with words that seemed to jump around on the page, letters that refused to stay in order, sentences that made no sense no matter how hard he tried. 4 different high schools. Can you imagine that? 4 different places where you're supposed to learn, make friends, figure out who you are. Most teenagers struggle with just one high school. Keanu had to navigate 4 of them, each with its own social rules, its own challenges, its own way of making a dyslexic kid feel like he didn't belong. Teachers didn't always understand. Other students didn't always care. The education system wasn't built for kids whose brains worked like Keanu's, so he fell behind. He struggled, and eventually he did what many kids in his situation do. He dropped out at 17, walking away without a diploma. Without that piece of paper, society tells you that you need to succeed. But dropping out didn't mean giving up. See? While Keanu was failing at reading and struggling with traditional school, something else was happening. Something magical. He was discovering that he could become someone else. That when he stepped onto a stage or in front of a camera, the awkward kid who couldn't read properly disappeared. In his place stood characters. People with confidence. People with purpose. People who belonged. Acting became his escape, his therapy, his way of telling the world that just because he couldn't succeed in a classroom didn't mean he couldn't succeed in life. At 15, Keanu started doing school plays. It wasn't about fame or fortune back then. It was about feeling something other than inadequate. When he pretended to be someone else, he didn't have to think about his absent father. He didn't have to worry about his reading disability. He didn't have to feel like the kid who never quite fit in anywhere. He also found ice hockey. The cold Canadian rinks became another refuge. On the ice, dyslexia didn't matter. Reading didn't matter. All that mattered was speed, skill, and the pure physical joy of movement. He was actually pretty good at it too. Good enough that for a while hockey seemed like it might be his future. But life had other plans. His teachers might not have believed in him. The education system might have failed him. But somewhere deep inside, Keanu had discovered something that nobody could take away. A work ethic. A determination to prove that his worth wasn't measured by grades or diplomas, or his ability to read like everyone else. Years later, when people asked him about those difficult school years, Keanu didn't make excuses. He didn't play the victim. He simply said that pretending was his way of coping. That acting helped him deal with not fitting in. That performing gave him a place where he finally belonged. Think about that for a second. A kid abandoned by his father, dragged across continents by a struggling single mother, unable to read properly, moving between 4 different high schools, and eventually dropping out. On paper, this is the story of someone who should have been broken by life. Someone who should have ended up bitter, angry, lost, but that's not what happened. What happened instead was that Keanu learned one of life's most important lessons way too early. He learned that stability is an illusion, that family doesn't always look like what you see in movies, that success doesn't come from following the traditional path, that sometimes the very things that make you different are the things that will eventually make you special. His childhood taught him empathy. When you've moved as many times as he did, you learn to read people differently. You learn to connect quickly. You learn that kindness matters because you never know when you'll need it from a stranger in a new city. His dyslexia taught him creativity. When your brain can't process information the way everyone else's does, you find new ways to learn, new ways to understand, new ways to see the world that others might miss. His father's absence taught him about loss, about the kind of pain that never really goes away. It just becomes part of who you are, about the importance of being present for people when they need you, because he knew exactly what it felt like when someone wasn't. By the time Keanu was a teenager, he'd lived enough lives for 3 people. He'd experienced more instability, more rejection, more reasons to give up than most adults face in a lifetime, but he didn't give up. He didn't become another statistic of a broken home and a failed education. Instead, he kept showing up, kept trying, kept believing that somewhere out there was a life worth fighting for. He didn't know it yet, but all of this pain, all of this struggle, all of these early lessons in survival were preparing him for something. Not just for Hollywood success, but for the kind of losses that would come later, the kind of tragedies that break most people completely. Keanu was learning to be unbreakable, not in the superhero way where nothing ever hurts, but in the real way where everything hurts but you keep going anyway, where you learn that you can lose everything and still find reasons to be kind, where you discover that your past doesn't have to define your future. This was just the beginning of his story. A boy without a father, without stability, without the education society said he needed. A boy who should have been broken before he even started. But Keanu Reeves was never very good at doing what he should. He was too busy learning how to survive. And later, that survival instinct would become something Hollywood had never seen before, something that would change everything. But first he had to grow up. And growing up meant facing even bigger challenges, even deeper losses. Even more reasons to break. The question was, would he? The 1980s rolled in, and that high school dropout from Canada started getting small acting roles. Nobody knew his name yet. Nobody cared about his tragic backstory. He was just another young actor trying to make it in Hollywood, a city that chews up dreamers and spits them out every single day. But Keanu had something different. A quiet intensity, a way of making you believe every word he said, even when he was playing characters nothing like himself. In 1986, he landed a role in a film called River's Edge. It wasn't a blockbuster. It wasn't the kind of movie that makes you famous overnight. But people in the industry noticed. This kid could act. Then came the late 80s and early 90s, and everything exploded. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure turned him into a household name. Point Break made him an action star. Speed launched him into the stratosphere. Suddenly, the kid who couldn't read properly in school was one of the biggest movie stars on the planet. By the mid-90s, Keanu Reeves was everywhere, and then came 1999. The year that would change everything in ways nobody could have predicted. The Matrix hit theaters in March, and the world lost its mind. This wasn't just a movie. It was a cultural earthquake. People saw it multiple times, debating its philosophy, copying the moves, buying the long black coats. Keanu, playing a computer hacker named Neo who discovers reality isn't real, became an icon. The film made hundreds of millions of dollars. His face was on every magazine cover, every talk show, every corner of pop culture. On paper, this should have been the happiest time of his life. He'd made it. He'd proven everyone wrong. The dropout, the kid with dyslexia, the boy abandoned by his father had become one of the most recognized faces on earth. But behind the cameras, behind the smiles at premieres, behind the success that everyone envied, Keanu was drowning in grief. Let me take you back a few years, back to 1991 when Keanu got news that would terrify anyone. His younger sister, Kim, was diagnosed with leukemia, cancer. The kind that attacks your blood, your bone marrow, the very thing that keeps you alive. She was only 25 years old. Remember, Keanu had already lost his father. He'd already grown up without stability. His sister was one of the few constants in his chaotic childhood. Now doctors were telling him she might die. Most people in his position would have kept working, kept chasing success, kept building their career. After all, he was on the verge of massive stardom. This was the time to be selfish, to focus on himself. But that's not what Keanu did. He put his career on hold. Not completely, but enough to be there. He spent time in hospitals. He sat with Kim during treatments. He held her hand when she was scared. He refused to let her face cancer alone. For nearly 10 years while his sister battled this disease, Keanu was there. Not for the cameras, not for publicity. Just because she needed him. Years later, people would claim he donated 70% of his Matrix earnings to leukemia research and hospitals. Whether that exact number is true or not, nobody knows for sure. Keanu never talks about his charity work, but people who know him say he's been giving away money for decades quietly, without wanting credit or recognition. His sister survived. Against the odds, she beat cancer and went into remission. It was a rare piece of good news in a life that seemed determined to break him. But life wasn't done with Keanu yet. Not even close. In 1993, while filming Speed, the movie that would make him a massive action star, Keanu got a phone call that stopped his world. His best friend was dead, River Phoenix. 23 years old. Gone. If you don't know who River Phoenix was, imagine the most talented young actor of his generation. Sensitive, brilliant, destined for greatness. He and Keanu had met on a film set and instantly connected. They were the same age, both navigating fame, both trying to stay grounded in an industry that destroys people. They became inseparable. When Keanu got offered a role in a film called My Own Private Idaho, he literally rode his motorcycle from Toronto to Florida, just to convince River to take the part. That's the kind of friendship they had. The kind where you cross a continent on 2 wheels because you believe in someone that much. River took the role. The film became a classic. Their friendship deepened. But River was struggling with demons Keanu didn't fully understand. Drug addiction is like that. It's quiet until it's not. It's manageable until suddenly, it's fatal. On Halloween night in 1993 outside a club in Los Angeles called the Viper Room, River Phoenix collapsed on the sidewalk. He'd taken a deadly mix of drugs. By the time the ambulance arrived, it was too late. 23 years old and one of the brightest lights in Hollywood was gone. Keanu was 23 too when it happened. The same age, he'd just lost the person who understood him better than almost anyone. The friend who made the crazy world of Hollywood feel less lonely. He didn't talk about it publicly. He didn't break down in interviews or write a memoir about his pain. He just kept working, kept showing up on set, kept doing his job. His co-star on Speed noticed he was hurting, but he hid it so well that most people never knew the depth of his grief. That's what Keanu does. He carries his pain quietly, never burdening others with it, but the universe wasn't finished testing him. Fast forward to 1998, The Matrix was about to come out. Keanu was playing in his rock band, Dogstar, because yes, in addition to everything else, he's a musician. They were promoting the band at a party when Keanu met someone who would change his life. Her name was Jennifer Syme. She worked as an assistant to the famous director David Lynch. She was beautiful, creative, full of life, and when she and Keanu met, something clicked instantly. Not the shallow Hollywood romance kind of click. The real kind. The soul-deep kind. They fell in love fast. The kind of love that makes you believe in second chances, in new beginnings, in the possibility that maybe, just maybe after all the loss and pain, something good can last. Within a year, Jennifer was pregnant. They were going to have a baby girl. They'd already picked out a name. Ava. Ava Archer Reeves. Can you imagine Keanu's feelings in that moment? A man who'd lost his father, watched his sister nearly die, lost his best friend, now about to become a father himself. About to break the cycle. About to give a child the love and stability he never had growing up. He was excited, terrified, hopeful. All the things every expecting parent feels, but magnified by a lifetime of loss. The pregnancy progressed normally. 8 months. They were so close. Just weeks away from meeting their daughter. Just weeks away from the family Keanu had always dreamed of. Then one day, Jennifer noticed something wrong. The baby hadn't moved in a while, too long. That instinct every mother has, the one that knows when something isn't right. They rushed to the hospital. It was December 24th, Christmas Eve. A day that's supposed to be about joy, about family, about celebration. But there was no celebration. No joy, no miracle. The doctors confirmed what Jennifer already feared in her heart. Ava was gone. Stillborn. 8 months of hope, of dreams, of planning for a future that would never happen, ended in a hospital room on Christmas Eve. Keanu held Jennifer's hand as they both cried. Nurses and doctors moved around them, doing whatever medical professionals do in these situations, but none of it mattered. Their daughter was gone before she ever took a breath. People say you can't understand that kind of loss unless you've lived it. The death of a child you'll never meet. The future you'll never have. The first steps, first words, first days of school that will never happen. It's not just grief. It's the loss of every tomorrow you'd imagined. The tragedy shattered them both. How do you comfort someone going through the same unimaginable pain you're feeling? How do you hold someone up when you can barely stand yourself? They tried. God knows they tried. But grief is a cruel thing. Sometimes it brings people together. Sometimes it pushes them apart. For Keanu and Jennifer, it was the latter. Just weeks after losing Ava, they separated. The love was still there, but the pain was too much. Every time they looked at each other, they saw the daughter they'd never hold. The family they'd never be. Keanu was 35 years old. He'd just starred in the biggest movie of his life. He was wealthy, famous, recognized everywhere he went, and he was completely broken. But the worst was yet to come. The year 2000 arrived with all its millennium celebrations, its hope for new beginnings, its promise of a fresh start. For most people, it was a time of optimism. For Keanu, it was just another year of surviving. He and Jennifer had broken up, but they hadn't really let go. How could they? They'd shared something most people can't even imagine. The loss of a child creates a bond that doesn't just disappear because you stop being a couple. They stayed in touch. They cared about each other. Some people even said they were trying to work things out, slowly finding their way back to each other. Keanu threw himself into work. That's what he'd always done when life got too painful. The Matrix had been a massive hit, so naturally Hollywood wanted sequels. He started filming The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions back-to-back. Grueling action sequences, long hours on set, physical training that would break most people. But Keanu welcomed it. When you're training until your body aches, you don't have time to think about the nursery you never got to use. When you're filming fight scenes, you don't have to feel the emptiness where your daughter should have been. Jennifer was trying to cope too, but in different ways. She struggled more than Keanu did, at least publicly. She started drinking more, partying harder, anything to numb the pain of losing Ava, anything to forget what Christmas Eve 1999 had taken from her. People who knew them both said Keanu tried to be there for her. But what can you do when someone is drowning and you're barely keeping your own head above water? Then came April 2001, 18 months after they'd buried their daughter together. 18 months of grief that neither of them had really processed or healed from. Jennifer went to a party one night at the home of a famous musician in Los Angeles. Just a normal evening out, the kind of thing people do in Hollywood all the time. When the party ended in the early morning hours, she got in her car to drive home. She never made it. Her SUV crashed into 3 parked cars. The vehicle rolled over. She was thrown from the car and died instantly. When the police arrived, they found medications in her system. A woman still medicating her grief, still trying to escape the pain that had consumed her life since losing her daughter. Keanu got the news, and something inside him must have just shattered completely. It wasn't just that Jennifer was gone. It was everything she represented. She was the last connection to Ava. She was the person who understood that specific grief because she'd lived it with him. She was the future he'd imagined, the family he'd dreamed of, the second chance he'd hoped for. Now she was gone too. Think about that timeline for a second. In less than 2 years, Keanu had lost his unborn daughter and the woman he loved. 2 years. Most people don't face that kind of concentrated tragedy in an entire lifetime. He was 36 years old at the peak of his career, filming the biggest movie sequels in Hollywood history. And he was attending another funeral, standing in another cemetery, saying goodbye to another person who should have been in his life for decades to come. 5 years later, in 2006, Keanu finally talked about it in an interview. Not in detail. He never does that, but enough to let people glimpse the depth of his pain. Grief changes shape, but it never ends, he said. People have a misconception that you can deal with it and say it's gone and I'm better. They're wrong. He talked about how he thinks about the people he's lost, wonders what life would be like if they were still here, what they might have done together, the moments they'll never share. I miss all the great things that will never be, he said. But here's the thing that makes this even harder. While Keanu was drowning in personal grief, Hollywood was preparing to turn its back on him professionally too. Remember how he'd become this massive star? How Speed had made him an action hero and The Matrix had made him a cultural icon? Well, there's a dark side to Hollywood's success that most people don't understand. When you're on top, everyone wants you. But if you make one wrong move, if you say no to the wrong people, if you're not careful, they'll exile you without a second thought. It started years earlier, actually, back when Speed became a huge hit in 1994, making over $350 million worldwide. The studio immediately wanted a sequel. Of course they did. That's how Hollywood works. If something makes money, you squeeze every drop out of it until audiences stop showing up. But Keanu said no to Speed 2. Now, to be fair, he had good reasons. He just finished filming Chain Reaction, another action movie. He was exhausted. He didn't want to do 2 action films back to back. Plus, when he read the script for Speed 2, his instincts told him it wasn't good. The first film had been about a bomb on a bus. Tense, fast-paced. The sequel was about a cruise ship. A cruise ship. Even Keanu, in interviews years later, pointed out the obvious problem. A cruise ship is even slower than a bus, he said, so he turned it down. Instead of chasing another paycheck, he went to Winnipeg, Canada, to perform Hamlet on stage, Shakespeare, theater. The thing that had saved him as a teenager when he felt like he didn't fit in anywhere. The studio was furious. In their eyes, Keanu had betrayed them. Rumors spread that he'd turned down the film to tour with his rock band, that he was difficult to work with, that he cared more about his music career than his film career. None of it was entirely true, but truth doesn't matter much when Hollywood decides to turn on you. They put him in what people in the industry call movie jail. Basically, the major studios stopped offering him big projects. They froze him out. Made sure everyone knew that Keanu Reeves was someone you couldn't count on, someone who'd walk away from a sure thing. This blacklisting lasted for years, over a decade, some people say, and when they finally let him back in, the projects weren't great. In 2008, he did The Day the Earth Stood Still. It made decent money, but it wasn't the kind of film that reminds people why they fell in love with an actor in the first place. Then came 47 Ronin in 2013, a samurai epic that should have been his triumphant return to big-budget filmmaking. Instead, it bombed spectacularly, lost the studio a fortune. Critics hated it. Audiences stayed away. Keanu Reeves, the guy who'd starred in the Matrix trilogy, one of the most successful franchises in cinema history, couldn't get a decent studio film to save his career. So he did what he'd always done when the mainstream rejected him. He went independent. Small films that nobody would see, but that meant something to him artistically. The Neon Demon, The Bad Batch, movies that played at film festivals instead of multiplexes. For most actors, this would have been the end of the story. A cautionary tale about saying no to Hollywood, about losing your daughter, your love, your career, everything that made life worth living, all within a few brutal years. Most people would have become bitter, angry at the world, resentful of the success they'd lost and the personal happiness that had been taken from them. Most people would have given up, checked out, stopped trying. But Keanu had been surviving impossible situations since he was 3 years old. He'd survived his father abandoning him. He'd survived moving between countries and schools. He'd survived dyslexia and dropping out. He'd survived his sister's cancer. He'd survived River's death. He'd survived losing Ava and Jennifer. He'd survived Hollywood's rejection. What nobody realized, not even Keanu himself maybe, was that all of this pain, all of this loss, all of this grief he'd been carrying for years, it wasn't breaking him. It was preparing him for something nobody saw coming. A role that would not only revive his career, but would also give him a way to channel all that grief, all that pain, all those years of loss into something powerful. In 2013, while Hollywood had basically written him off. While he was doing small indie films and trying to figure out what came next, Keanu got a script. A small-budget action film about a retired assassin. The character's wife dies. Then some thugs kill his dog, the last gift from his dead wife, and the assassin goes on a rampage to get revenge. Most actors would have read that script and seen a generic action movie, another hitman story in a genre that had been done to death. But Keanu read it and saw something different. He saw a man destroyed by grief, a man who'd lost everything, a man who had nothing left except his pain and his need for justice. He saw himself. The character's name was John Wick, and everything was about to change. When Keanu read the John Wick script, something clicked. Not just professionally, but personally. Here was a character who understood loss in a way that most action heroes never do. John Wick wasn't saving the world or fighting terrorists. He was a man who'd found peace, found love, lost it all, and then lost the one thing that kept him connected to that love. In interviews later, Keanu would talk about why the role spoke to him. It wasn't about the action sequences or the cool fight choreography. It was about the grief. "I love his grief," Keanu said, and people who didn't know his story might have found that strange. But for someone who'd spent years carrying his own grief quietly, who understood what it meant to lose the people you love most, John Wick made perfect sense. He worked closely with the writers to develop the character. This wasn't just another paycheck role. This was personal. He wanted to get it right, wanted to show what grief really looks like when it turns into action, into purpose, into the only thing that keeps you moving forward when everything else has been taken away. The film had a tiny budget, $20 million, which in Hollywood terms is basically nothing. No major studio backing, no guarantee of success, just a small action film with an aging actor who most people thought was past his prime. Keanu was approaching 50 years old. In Hollywood, that's when they start writing you off as an action star. But nobody told Keanu that. Or if they did, he didn't listen. He trained like a man half his age. Learned judo, jiu-jitsu, and tactical firearms training. Spent months working with fight coordinators to make every move look real, feel real, be real. He insisted on doing his own stunts. Wanted the audience to see him, not some stunt double going through the physical hell that John Wick endures. There's behind-the-scenes footage of Keanu training for the role, and it's honestly incredible. He's moving through shooting courses with professional precision, hitting targets with accuracy that would make actual trained soldiers jealous. He's not faking it. He learned how to do it for real. The director, Chad Stahelski, was a stunt coordinator who'd worked with Keanu on The Matrix. He knew what Keanu was capable of physically, but more importantly, he understood what Keanu was bringing emotionally to this role. This wasn't just acting. This was catharsis. John Wick was released in October 2014. No fanfare, no massive marketing campaign, just a small action film that nobody expected much from. The industry had moved on from Keanu Reeves. He'd had his moment with The Matrix, and that moment was over. That's what everyone thought. Everyone was wrong. The film opened quietly, making decent but not spectacular numbers at first. But something unusual started happening. People who saw it told their friends. Those friends told their friends. Social media started buzzing. Word of mouth spread like wildfire. This wasn't just another generic action movie. This was something different. Something special. The action was ballet. Every fight scene was choreographed like a dance, but brutal and real. No quick cuts to hide the stunt work. No shaky camera to disguise what's happening. Just Keanu in long takes doing things that action heroes half his age couldn't pull off. But it was more than just great action. The film had heart. It had emotion. When John Wick cries over his dead dog, you feel it. When he suits up to go on his rampage, you understand why. The film gave his grief weight and meaning. It didn't treat it as a joke or a simple motivation. It respected the pain. Critics started praising it. Audiences loved it. By the time John Wick finished its theatrical run, it had made over $86 million worldwide. Not massive by blockbuster standards, but incredible for a film its size. More importantly, it became a sleeper hit on home video. Everyone who'd missed it in theaters rushed to watch it at home. Keanu Reeves was back. But this wasn't just a comeback. This was a resurrection. Hollywood noticed. The same industry that had frozen him out, that had put him in movie jail, that had written him off as a has-been, suddenly remembered why they'd loved him in the first place. Keanu wasn't just an action star. He was something rare, an actor who could make you believe, who could make you care, who could carry a film on presence and authenticity alone. In 2017, John Wick Chapter 2 was released. Bigger budget, wider release, higher expectations, and it delivered. The film made $174 million worldwide, more than double what the first film earned. The franchise wasn't just successful, it was growing. 2 years later, John Wick, Chapter 3. Parabellum hit theaters and made $328 million. Each film was doing better than the last. That almost never happens. Usually sequels make less money as audiences lose interest. But John Wick was different. People couldn't get enough of this character, this world, this specific brand of action that Keanu had helped create. Then in 2023, John Wick. Chapter 4 became the highest-grossing film in the franchise, earning $440 million worldwide. A franchise that started with a $20 million budget and modest expectations had become a billion-dollar global phenomenon. But here's what makes this story really special. It wasn't just about the money or the box office success. It was about what John Wick represented to Keanu personally. In interviews, he opened up about the connection between the character and his own life. It's about the love of the person you're grieving for, he explained once. Anytime you can keep company with that fire, it is warm. Think about that for a second. Keanu had spent years being told to move on from his grief, to get over it, to heal and let go. But John Wick gave him permission to do the opposite, to sit with that grief, to honor it, to transform it into something meaningful. Every time he played John Wick, he was channeling real pain, real loss, the death of River, the loss of Ava, the death of Jennifer, his sister's battle with cancer, his father's abandonment. All of it went into this character who refuses to stop fighting even when the entire world is against him. And audiences felt it. That's why John Wick connected with people in a way that most action films don't. Because underneath all the gunfights and car chases and incredible stunts, there was something real, something human, something that hurt. The franchise didn't just revive Keanu's career, it transformed how Hollywood saw him. He wasn't just Neo from The Matrix anymore. He wasn't just that guy from Speed. He was John Wick, a character who had somehow become more iconic, more beloved, more defining of his career than anything he'd done before. Industry experts started calling it one of the greatest comebacks in Hollywood history. An actor who'd been written off, who'd faced rejection and tragedy and loss, who'd been exiled by the very industry he'd helped build, had come back stronger than ever. But success wasn't changing Keanu. That's the thing about him that people find so refreshing. While other actors at his level are demanding private jets and special treatment, Keanu was still riding the subway, still eating lunch alone on sidewalks, still treating crew members with the same respect he treated studio executives. Stories about his kindness became as famous as his movies. He bought Harley-Davidson motorcycles for his entire stunt team on The Matrix. He took pay cuts so that productions could afford to hire other actors he believed in. He regularly gave away huge portions of his salary to crew members who made less than he did. There's a famous story from 1997 that resurfaced during his comeback. Someone photographed him sitting on a sidewalk with a homeless man, sharing food, just talking, not for publicity, not for social media likes. The photo was taken by accident. He was just being human with another human. That's who Keanu was before the tragedy. That's who he remained after it. That's who he still is now. In 2019, something else happened that shocked people. After years of avoiding serious relationships, after saying in interviews that he wanted to get married and have kids but struggling to open his heart again, Keanu appeared at a public event with someone special. Her name is Alexandra Grant. She's a visual artist. They'd been friends for years, collaborating on projects, building trust slowly. When they finally went public with their relationship, the photos showed something beautiful. Keanu looked genuinely happy. Not the fake Hollywood smile, but real joy, the kind that reaches your eyes. He was 55 years old. He'd spent 2 decades carrying grief that would have destroyed most people. And here he was, smiling, holding hands, allowing himself to be vulnerable again. The internet lost its collective mind with happiness. People who'd followed his story, who knew about his losses, who'd watched him survive everything life threw at him, they celebrated like he was family, because in a way he was. Keanu had become this symbol of resilience, of kindness surviving in a cruel world, of hope persisting through darkness. John Wick had given him back his career, but more importantly, it had given him a way to process his grief, to honor the people he'd lost, to transform pain into art. And Hollywood, the industry that tried to break him, had to admit something. They'd failed. Keanu Reeves was unbreakable, but the story doesn't end there. Today, if you walk through New York City, you might see Keanu Reeves sitting on a bench eating a sandwich. Not at some exclusive restaurant, not surrounded by bodyguards and assistants, just a guy taking a lunch break watching the world go by. People recognize him, of course, but he's always kind, always willing to take a photo or sign an autograph, never acting like he's too important or too busy. This is the same man who's now worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The same man whose movies have made billions at the box office. The same man who's become one of the most beloved figures in entertainment. But fame and fortune haven't changed him, and people notice. In a world where celebrities often seem disconnected from reality, Keanu feels real. That authenticity, that genuine humanity, it's not an act. It's who he's always been. The kid who got abandoned learned early that kindness matters. The teenager who couldn't read properly learned that everyone struggles with something. The man who lost everything learned that material success means nothing if you lose yourself in the process. The John Wick franchise continues to expand in ways nobody imagined. In April 2025, during a massive industry event in Las Vegas, the studio made an announcement that sent fans into a frenzy. John Wick 5 is happening. Keanu is returning. The director is back. The entire team that made the franchise special is coming together again. But they're not just making another sequel for the money. The producers made it clear that they wouldn't return unless they had something truly special to say. Something fresh. Something that honors the character and everything he represents. Think about what that means for a second. Keanu could milk this franchise forever. He could phone it in, collect massive paychecks, and nobody would blame him. He's earned it. He's paid his dues in ways most people can't imagine. But that's not who he is. He cares about getting it right, about making sure John Wick's story is told properly. The franchise is also expanding into animation, an animated film that goes back in time, showing John Wick before the first movie, showing how he completed the impossible task that let him retire, how he earned the right to walk away from his violent life and be with the woman he loved. Keanu will voice the character, bringing that same intensity and emotion to animation. There's also a spin-off film being made. The character Kane, played by martial arts legend Donnie Yen, is getting his own story, a standalone adventure that explores what happened to him after the events of John Wick 4. Yen himself is directing it. The studio is even developing a television series that Keanu will produce. John Wick has become more than a franchise. It's a universe, a world that people want to spend time in because it respects its audience, because it treats action as art, because at its core, it's still about that original idea. A man dealing with grief in the only way he knows how. But Keanu's impact goes far beyond John Wick. In 2020, the New York Times did something interesting. They ranked the 25 greatest actors of the 21st century. Keanu Reeves came in at number 4, not because he's done the most prestigious films, not because he's won a shelf full of Oscars, but because of his unique ability to connect with audiences across generations and genres. He's the guy from Bill and Ted who made us laugh. He's Neo who made us question reality. He's John Wick who made us feel grief and rage and justice all at once. He somehow managed to be both a serious dramatic actor and a goofy comedic presence, both an action hero and a sensitive soul, both a Hollywood icon and just a regular guy. That versatility, that range, it comes from his life experience, from being the kid who had to adapt to survive, from the teenager who learned to become different characters because he didn't always feel comfortable being himself, from the man who faced enough loss to break anyone but somehow kept his heart open. The internet has embraced Keanu in ways that would be weird for most celebrities. There are memes claiming he's immortal, that he secretly lived throughout history as different people. When a late-night host asked him about it, Keanu played along with perfect humor. He compared himself to historical figures, talking about having the same eyes and nose and beard, fully aware of how absurd it all was but enjoying the moment anyway. When someone at a press event asked if he ever ages, his response was simple and perfect. Yeah, man, I age. No ego, no pretension, just honesty. That's the thing about Keanu that drives people crazy in the best way. He doesn't take himself too seriously. He's accomplished more than most actors dream of. survived more than most people could handle, and yet he remains humble, grounded, real. His charity work has become legendary, even though he never talks about it. He started a private foundation years ago that helps children's hospitals in cancer research. He refuses to attach his name to it publicly, doesn't want credit or recognition, just wants to help because his sister battled cancer, and he knows what families go through. The stories keep coming. A stranded passenger stuck on the side of the road once got a ride from Keanu, who was driving by and stopped to help. A film crew working on one of his movies received unexpected bonuses and gifts. A fan who told him about a personal tragedy received a thoughtful, handwritten response months later. These aren't publicity stunts. They're just Tuesday for Keanu Reeves. In 2024, he voiced Shadow the Hedgehog in Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Yes, a cartoon character. Because why not? He's also involved in video games, bringing his motion capture and voice work to characters that matter to younger generations. He appeared in Cyberpunk 2077, one of the most anticipated games ever made, playing a character named Johnny Silverhand. He's even a comic book creator now. He co-wrote a series called Berserker about an immortal warrior. It became one of the best-selling comic book launches in recent years. The story is about violence, immortality, and the burden of living too long watching everyone you love die. It's not hard to see the personal themes there. Keanu is 60 years old now, an age where most action stars have long since retired or moved into mentoring roles or directing. But he's still doing his own stunts, still training like a man half his age, still pushing himself physically in ways that would injure most people. For John Wick 4, he trained with nunchucks until he could use them like a master. He learned new fighting styles. He put his body through hell because that's what the character demanded. At one point during filming, he suffered injuries that would have shut down production if it was anyone else. But Keanu pushed through because he respected the craft too much to let people down. His relationship with Alexandra Grant has given people hope. Hope that you can lose everything and still find love again. Hope that grief doesn't have to define you forever. Hope that opening your heart after devastating loss is possible, even if it takes decades. They're not a flashy Hollywood couple. They don't do magazine covers or share every detail of their lives on social media. They just seem genuinely happy together. Two creative people who found each other later in life and built something real. When you look at Keanu's entire journey, from abandoned child to struggling student to Hollywood star, to grieving father to industry exile to global icon, it's almost impossible to believe it's one person's life. It's the kind of story that would seem over the top if it was fiction. But it's not fiction. It's real. All of it happened to one man who somehow never let it make him bitter or cruel or cold. Hollywood tried to break Keanu Reeves. Life tried to break him. Tragedy after tragedy after tragedy tried to break him. His father abandoned him. His education system failed him. His best friend died. His daughter died. His love died. His career was destroyed. His industry blacklisted him. And yet here he stands, not just surviving but thriving. Not just successful but beloved. Not just famous but genuinely respected by everyone who knows him. The lesson of Keanu's life isn't that bad things won't happen to good people. They will. They absolutely will. His story proves that life can be devastatingly unfair, that you can do everything right and still lose everything that matters. But his story also proves something else. Something more important. It proves that you get to choose who you become in response to that pain. You can let it make you hard and bitter. Or you can let it make you more compassionate, more understanding. More human, Keanu chose compassion. He chose kindness. He chose to keep his heart open even when it had been shattered so many times that staying closed would have been easier. That's what shocked Hollywood. Not that he came back. Lots of actors make comebacks. What shocked them was that he came back as the same person he'd always been. Still kind, still generous, still humble. Still genuinely good in a place where goodness often feels like weakness. They tried to break Keanu Reeves. Life tried its absolute hardest. And they failed. Because some people, the rare ones, the special ones, they're simply unbreakable. Not because nothing hurts them, but because they refuse to let the hurt change who they are at their core. That's Keanu Reeves. That's his real superpower. Not the action hero stuff. Not the movie star charisma. Just the simple, profound choice to remain kind in a world that gave him every reason to be cruel. And that's why we love him. That's why his story matters. That's why he'll always be John Wick, Neo, Ted, and just Keanu. sitting on a bench eating a sandwich, treating everyone like they matter. Because to him, they do.